So tonight on the podcast, on the featured interview of this show, I have an amazing guest. I have Liam O'Donnell, a co-writer and producer of the movie. You'll remember this one way back. It was a movie called Skyline that came out. It was like independent, kind of lower budget sci-fi that had Turk from Scrubs in it. How are you doing, Liam? How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm in London for the week. Actually, it's for a few weeks, trying to finish this movie on time.
Awesome. And we're going to get into that in a second because you were the writer on the first Skyline and then moved on to become the director of Beyond Skyline, which I believe was like 7 or 8 years later. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And that came out a couple of years back. And now the I suppose you would call it a threequel, Skylines or Skyline 3, or as I saw one person call it, SKYLIN3S.
yeah. It's I just go with Skylines, and I'm hoping over the years that the 3 just like magically drifts away. But
yeah,
it was called. I named it Skyline. I came up with that pitch 3 years ago. We shot it with that title, and then in post, they came to us and said, there's this Netflix has this show out of Germany called Skylines, and we can't clear the title globally. Like, do you want to call it something else? And I was too married to the fact that it's called Skylines, because it's very much an Aliens like homage. It's like it's you'll see it's within the DNA that it's like to go from the other stories to now like a big space adventure on the alien homeworld. It just felt too perfect, so I opted to go with the number for the E, and here we are.
It works as well because these days all the youngsters, they love all that. They love replacing numbers with letters with numbers, and
I do find that to be a generational divide because Lindsay, our star Lindsay Morgan, has a much younger fan base than I think some of the fans from the first or even the second. And they don't give a shit about the title. They're just excited for it. But I see like 40-year-old dudes on the internet kind of clowning it the most. So I'm kind of like always been trying to impress 40-year-old dudes on the internet, and now I'm like, maybe I should just go with this younger crowd. They seem to be a little bit more into it.
Just reach for the Disney audience.
Yes, exactly. The up and coming demo.
I've been asking a lot of people this as they've been coming on, especially creators like yourself. Obviously, with the whole pandemic and the lockdown and everything, and I like to ask how it's affected your creative process and how it's kind of, I guess it's really kind of affecting the premiere of or the release of Skylines.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but it's a UK co-production, so Lip Sync is the post facility and the VFX facility for the movie. So I've been coming back and forth to the UK for the past year to work, on the edit and to work on the visual effects and to work with the sound team. And so that was going on up until February. I was here for like a month. And when I flew back, March hit, everything got locked down, and we kind of moved into just a fully remote post from that point on, where we would be doing, VFX reviews via Zoom and CineSync and using Frame.io. Which ended up using that for sound, for composers, for everything. So, I mean, in some cases, we're incredibly fortunate to have it. And I think personally, like how it affected me, if I didn't have this movie during this pandemic, I honestly, it's like life-saving, because I also had my wife was pregnant with our 4th child, who was just born a month ago. So it was just like a lot going on.
Awesome.
But to have this sort of focus and passion, and something that I could coming from writing, it's just inherently more difficult than any other part of the process. So if I had to be stuck writing a script during the pandemic, I would have been miserable. I tried 2 different scripts, and with middling results. It was just so much harder than waking up in the morning and seeing visual effects shots and giving notes and giving feedback and working with other people than staring at a blank page. So to anyone who has been writing during this pandemic and has been writing well and productively, like, here, tip of my cap to you, because to me that was a bridge too far. So I just focused on finishing the film and getting through entertaining 3 kids without any school or friends or family. And now and now it's 4 kids with a newborn. So yeah, it was definitely, though, like I said, a blessing to have this, and it'll always be something I'm very, very grateful for. This movie, it kind of came in all of the perfect timing in a lot of ways for me.
I've had quite a few different people on kind of talking about those situations, and we've had a couple of writers who have said, "Oh, I've never been so productive. I've written this and I've written that," and then we've had some stunt guys who literally, like, their entire world just kind of stopped because it's stunts. What you're going to do if you're not doing the stunt work, So that kind of stopped, and it's interesting. But one of the things I do keep getting is the guys who've managed, like you say, in post production to sort of finish their movie during COVID, and the fact that they've been able to link up over Zoom, Frame.io, and all these other wonderful platforms that people have been using. It's great to hear, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out on the other side of this, like when we finally get rid of it.
Yeah, there is that part. Like, I'd say the con of it on a creative standpoint is like not being able to go into the VFX facility and look at dailies on a big screen. Obviously, that has a lot of value. I got a bigger monitor to check, but it's still not the same. And it's also like being in the room and looking at the shot looping. You can kind of, it just sometimes would be more conducive to brainstorming on different ideas and kind of improving things. And whereas like Zoom, if a Zoom goes quiet for too long and you're just thinking, you kind of get, it's not the same energy, No, so that would be there was parts where that was really frustrating. But in general, the flexibility of it was quite amazing, especially because, it'll be 8:30 in the morning for me, and it's like 5:30 here in London, and so we could kind of no matter what was going on, we could link up at least once a day and push the ball a little bit further down the field.
The ball's nearly in the end zone, so you're getting there. It's
I honestly, I think I'm gonna drop for like 2 weeks when that happens. It's like I can feel it.
I love the fact that you kind of because obviously the movie was supposed to be getting shown on the big screen at Frightfest in a couple of weeks. I think it's the end of this month, but Frightfest has kind of gone down and it's gone digital and everything. But I love the fact that you've technically not finished the movie or seen the movie yourself yet. I love that.
No. Yeah. I mean, you haven't seen the movie until like the print master, and that's scheduled for the 15th. And then 10 days later, we'll be sharing it with Frightfest UK. Yeah, so awesome. There's still, obviously we have animation in. Thankfully, we're not that crazy, but it's just the comps coming in. Now that I am at Lip Sync, and I'm grading things on a big screen and looking at the mix, you're like, God damn it, we missed the alien's eyes in that shot, and you're looking at it on your monitor, the QuickTime, it's a blurry thing, and then he turns around just for enough frames that my great I have an alien eye specialist named Justin Martinez, who I will send him those shots and he can crank them out, and he really is almost like an actor in the movie, because our alien character Trent from Beyond Skyline has a much bigger part in this movie. And so he had to do something like 400 just eye shots throughout the movie, and he kind of acts it out and does his own, based off his own eyes, and gives this man in a foam latex suit and a helmet a lot of emotion that sticks to our suit actor Jeremy Fitzgerald's really great performance in camera. But it's an interesting alchemy on how to make those creatures kind of come to life.
I would like to go back a little bit, and I'd like to find out a little bit about yourself and how you actually got into this industry, and why the hell would you do it?
Why the hell would I do it? There's so many of those things. They're all kind of balled up, and I think I'm thinking about like privilege in a way of like I had a lot of advantages. One being, I had this uncle who wrote a book about my grandfather's court case. was called Deadly Force. And even when I was a little kid, this Deadly Force book was made into a TV movie starring Richard Crenna playing my grandfather.
Nice.
As a Boston cop who becomes a lawyer who takes on this case against the Boston Police Department for wrongfully killing an African-American man in Boston. And so it's called A Case of Deadly Force, the movie. It's on Tubi, if you want to check it out. It's actually a pretty good TV movie. So it was made for like CBS TV movie. But when I think about that, I'm like, I think even like if you're 5 years old and your parents are like, hey, this guy is playing your dad in the TV movie, I think it probably like changes things in your brain of like what barriers are and what's possible. Because you're like, wait, what? So I think even when I go back to there, I think that's one kind of seed. Later, my uncle, his name is Lawrence O'Donnell, he ended up working in the Senate. He left entertainment. He sold this thing. He wrote the script, and then he left entertainment, worked in the Senate. So then later when they were doing The West Wing, he got kind of like offered to come aboard because he was the perfect guy. He was a guy who was a writer, but he'd also actually worked on the Hill. So he started working on The West Wing in the 90s, and his career kind of took off from there. So when I was in college, I wanted to go do politics myself. I was more into politics, believe it or not. I went down to DC and did an internship at the Senate, and my uncle happened to be filming his spinoff of The West Wing while I was down there. So I got to go visit a set for the first time when I was like, I want to say 20. And it was called Mr. Sterling, starring Josh Brolin. And this was like before the Brolin Renaissance, 2002. This was post Mod Squad, but pre Country for Old Men, pre No Country for Old Men.
Are we basing the Brolin Renaissance at the start of Mod Squad? Is that where we're putting
No, I think the Mod Squad was like a blip where everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's the older brother from Goonies. Haven't seen him for a while." And then the Brolin Renaissance, I think, really begins at No Country for Old Men, and we're still living in it. It's been 13 years of a beautiful Renaissance. But he was awesome to me, and that was, I think, again, just an experience where I was like, oh my God, a film set. So I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I want to do politics, and then these guys are kind of doing politics, kind of doing a movie, and they all looked like they were having a hell of a lot more fun than the miserable people that were working in my Senate office. So I think it was like, okay, let me think about doing something different. So after college, I just decided I was going to take a year to go to LA and see what would happen. I went with my best friend, Matthew Santoro, who was a visual artist. We roomed together, and he was trying to make it in motion graphics and stuff like that. And I was trying to make it in writing. And it's kind of funny, like within the first 6 months, we met a bunch of different people that were kind of working in pothead production companies where they literally pay you in pot and burritos and stuff like that. And those guys tangentially knew Greg and Colin Strauss. And Matt's visual style and my kind of writing, like we're all kind of liked all the same stuff as touchstones. So when I met Greg, I was like, you got to meet my friend Matt. And we all kind of gelled and were immediately kind of working on, they were really big in music videos and commercials, and they had yet to do a film. So they brought us on to kind of work on their music videos and commercial treatments. So we would make these visual pitches where I would write it and Matt would do the visuals for them, and we'd work with the brothers. And we started booking a bunch of jobs, and then Aliens versus Predator 2 script showed up for them because I started reading their scripts and giving them notes and kind of consulting on it. And when that script showed up, we were just like, everyone was just so determined to land that movie because, you know, we grew up with those franchises and we wanted to do it so bad. So we kind of like pulled, you know, I was a single guy at the time, so was Matthew. And so we just kind of pulled all-nighters for like almost a month straight, just working, cramming on this pitch package and with the brothers. And then they went in to Fox and kind of just killed it in the room, and they ended up getting this movie. So then the next year of my life was sort of like kind of being in this weird apprenticeship where I just got to help them in a consultant space. I had no real official responsibilities, but they liked having me on set, kind of looking at everything, overseeing the previs, because we had a previs artist in their trailer working on shots for what the next day's sequence would be. And so kind of relaying that to what they were doing on set. And that previs artist was Joshua Cortez, who we ended up writing Skyline together. So that was kind of the natural progression to then getting to the first movie. And they were gracious enough to give me a producing credit on Skyline, and kind of go from being the like whisper in your ear consultant on AVPR to just being able to, voice my opinions freely. And I really liked working with the actors and kind of having that flexibility. I wasn't much of a visualist yet. These guys, they all had such strong visual command and vocabulary. So I was pretty patient in the fact that like, I wasn't like, oh, I just want to rush and direct something. I don't care what it is. I kind of was like, if I direct something, I want to have like the best DP possible so that it doesn't look like a writer's directorial debut, which is kind of like generally like they don't seem to put as much thought into the visuals because they think their words are enough, I guess would be the stereotype.
Yeah.
Maybe that was my own insecurity. That's what I thought I would be. So I really wanted to work with someone who was going to give it a real style if I did it. And thankfully, things aligned for part two. And I worked with a really great DP named Christopher Probst, who kind of was, again, another mentorship for me. Because I was 32 when we shot that movie, when we started it. And he, was such an experienced, not only DP, but, cameraman. He had been doing camera operating before he was a DP on TV shows and stuff. So he really kind of helped me visualize the camera as a character within the scene, and kind of, if something wasn't working with the actors, it's not necessarily about the actors. Sometimes it's the blocking and the camera and how we can give energy, especially in action, through the lens. So that was kind of just a great place for me to like jump into this next movie, taking all the lessons I learned. We had to shoot, because it was an EU and UK production, we had to limit the amount of American crew. So it was kind of just me and a bunch of other new people that I hadn't got to work with before, but that was also another blessing in its own right, because I got to work with a bunch of different talents than I probably would have been exposed to. And I think it gives each chapter a very distinct flavor, a very distinct visual style. This one is definitely, our DP is Alain Duplantier, and it's a very French visual style. It's got, some definite Fifth Element vibes and a lot more color. And I just kind of tried to let him embrace that. I was like, each one should be different. Let's do something a little bit more wild. I mean, this is post-apocalyptic and it's on an alien planet. We're not married to any continuity. We can do whatever the hell we want. So
that's everything so far. To throw out a sort of, it's got a very Fifth Element vibe, and the third one's like, oh, really?
I think more visual,
yeah,
but still somewhat. Yeah, I mean, Fifth Element's definitely more comedic and playful, but we've built our way up to it. It's like I feel like you've earned enough of. There was more comedy in the second one, but it was there was more in the script than what ended up being in the movie. And I wanted to kind of, because it was just kind of like, I think the first time where you're like trying to deal with tones and figure out when you can move in and out of those tones. And I don't think I was as adept at that, obviously, the first time. And so in this one, just from the script into then production and working with the actors, it was very important to me that we have those moments of levity so that it's not like too much of an unrelenting, intense, brain bashing. Because it just depended on the audience for Beyond Skyline. If you saw it with like real genre heavy fans, they found the moments of levity that were there, because there are funny moments, but it's not like as deliberate, kind of poking you in the ribs as a Marvel formula. You know what I mean? But they're like, when we have you know, Antonio Fargas say, like, you know, you bitches ain't leaving me. Like, we know that's funny. And you know, in Insidious, you know, that got like a huge, you know, applause. So it just depends on I feel like that movie was very dependent on you seeing the movies it was referencing, because that was sort of having the conversation with the references a lot. And if you've seen all those movies, then the movie was a little bit more playful and a little bit more fun than people that hadn't. And I'd still notice that as the feedback to this day, is that, you know, the kind of more genre literate people seem to really like it. And then if you haven't seen all that stuff, you're just kind of watching like, this is a fucking weird movie that keeps getting weirder and bigger and crazier as it goes. Which isn't something that I'm necessarily going to stop doing, but I think we got better at modulating it, if that makes sense.
I think you're quite right, because especially in the second movie, I rewatched it again the other night, just in preparation for this and everything. And there is a point in the movie where there's just this huge sort of tonal genre shift, and it turns into like a punchy, kicky action movie, which personally I love because it's Iko Uwais, so I'm all over that. But it was just like, I didn't remember when I was watching it the second time, like this time, that shift, that huge shift. But it works. I mean, genre smashing's a good thing, and I do love all that, and you do it well in this one.
Yeah, it was interesting because it was like, we tried a bunch of different edits too. We tried opening the movie with them doing that first fight that Iko has in that hallway and stabbing the guy in the neck. Excuse me. And then kind of having the ship crash, and then doing the like the first movie 3 days earlier kind of. We did that flash forward cut, which made it feel a little bit more cohesive, but at the same time it just wasn't quite as like clean. And I felt like that, so it was like, okay, we showed you martial arts up front, it's going to come back there. But I ultimately liked the energy of kind of like, because we had such a short first act before the aliens came, that like showing aliens and then going before the aliens came just felt like, okay, like we need to just like have everyone meet Mark, you know, Frank Grillo's character, meet Trent, you know, have that kind of slower, laconic energy, because things are never going to get this calm ever again. It has about 6.5 minutes of like a normal movie pace, and then it's never stops. So it's interesting.
Balls to the wall in that second one. Yeah. Definitely. I'm sitting there thinking, oh great, it's another Frank Grillo kind of thinker. He's going to be walking around. He's going to protect this. Oh shit. Okay. Here we are.
A Frank Grillo thinker. I love it.
You don't get many of them nowadays. What I did want to ask, I want to jump back onto the first one quickly, and I suppose you kind of answered this a little bit with Alien vs. Predator, where in Skyline sort of being a little bit of an homage to it. Like, where did the idea for Skyline and this, because even in the first movie, although you don't really talk about it, you're world building like a son of a bitch, you know, like there's like this huge thing going on, and you know there's more happening. But where did this idea come from to you? Is it just you had a co-writer as well, but where did Skyline come from?
Yeah, I mean, it really came from the practicality of the location. It was like Greg had that penthouse. Greg Strauss, the co-director of Skyline, had this penthouse with a big glass view of LA, and we wanted to shoot something there. And it was like, okay, well, what would be a cool thing to wake up and see happening out the window in some sort of apocalypse? And so that kind of sometimes that's the best thing that drives the, you know, everything else, because you could just sit there and imagine it, and you can kind of put yourself through the paces. And then it was like coming up with the steps of you know, the mystery. I think it was definitely, you know, I was watching, I think like most genre enthusiasts, a lot of Lost at the time. So the whole like mystery box, flash forward opening, all that's in the DNA. And like, okay, first, you know, it's a light, and is it a weapon? Is it something? Is it a frequency? What is this? And then just kind of slowly revealing it in these parts until they come down from the clouds was something that kind of came early in between the four of us, the two writers and the two directors. We were all kind of pretty like locked in on like everyone saw that clearly in the same way.
Yeah.
And then it was I think the toughest part of that story and the part that like, you know, is the one that I would like to one day maybe do another edit of that, is that like that after they try to escape from the Ferrari to then the ending is where it's like it gets frustrating. And it was like we didn't quite have maybe the exact, I guess the reaction to that would be beyond Skyline was that like we're propulsive, we're always moving forward, we're going through that station. I always found in the screenings of Skyline that when they went back up to the penthouse, everyone's like the energy just died. It was like, oh, yeah, we're back in here. Are you kidding me? It was almost like we didn't give a good enough reason of why they had to be back in there, or maybe when they came back that it was like already destroyed. This is the type of thing you would do if you built it on a set, you know, or if you had more money. But there's just those type of things that, you know, when thinking more and the more experience you get of like, if you're going to come back to a set, change it in some way, make it, you know, drastically different, give it a different color scheme, half destroy it, burn it down. Just don't keep kind of pummeling people with the same visuals over and over again, because they can feel it. So yeah, that's kind of I guess that's a really long answer to how did you come up with Skyline, but I hadn't even thought of that in a long time about the different about that third act and all those kind of changes. But I think that's also why the ending kept getting longer, because we were so excited to be in a new location and we're working on the visual effects. And that's how I always judge people from the Skyline. If they're like, oh, I really liked the movie, but I hated the ending. I'm like, oh, you probably won't like Beyond Skyline because I like the ending. You know, like I really like how weird it gets at the ending and on the ship. And even just some of the visual storytelling of the ending, I think was the most accomplished part of the movie. Because it was very efficient and very kind of like, we had, it's kind of the lessons that I've taken onto these other movies, is that you don't have an infinite amount of shots because shots are money, but you're still using a lot of visual effects. But like each visual effect has to have a lot of information in it. It can't just be kind of frivolous. And so that's why I think that ending is kind of so visually interesting, and it is a nice piece of storytelling to say, like, you know, there's no audio that says like, oh, he's rejecting the programming and now he's going to find it. Like it's all done in the visuals and in the performance of the digital character. So yeah, I think that to me is my favorite part.
I think you're right as well, because like I said to you in the earlier on, like when I went to the cinema to watch it, I went with 3 other friends back in the days when you could actually go to a cinema. I remember those days.
Wow, those were nice.
So we went to the cinema to see it, and 2 of my friends, one of my friends was kind of like, yeah, it was a film, it was all right, and 2 of my other friends, two other friends like weren't, like you say, overly keen on the end and loved like everything before that. Thought it was great, like sort of loved the fact that you were kind of in that one location and the invasion was almost secondary to everything. It was just sort of happening outside. They kind of really liked that. But for me, it was kind of like, I do genuinely like that switch right at the end, because instantly I'm walking out of the cinema thinking, man, that sequel's going to be mental.
Yeah, you know, I just think that's interesting. It's like there's certain people that I'm just learning this kind of about myself, and it's the feedback you get from the movies too, is that like I get like a high off of ambition. Like when a movie is ambitious, I will suddenly go, and I kind of sit back and I feel like an adrenaline rush. But other people, they really want it to be like just a uniform like thing, and they kind of they prefer a movie have like a much smaller scope. If everything in the movie is like 100% in lockstep and it never overreaches its budget, it just is like almost like pristine in its size. And just for the life of me, I'm just never satisfied doing it that way. I probably would have a better career if I did it that way. I'd make more money. But for whatever reason, I'm like, I just want to I want to reach for the stars. If you're going to give me this much, I'm going to try to make it look 8 times as much. I'm not going to just shoot for what everyone else shoots that budget for. I'm going to try to do as much as I possibly can. And I think there's just a certain type of people that get off on that, and a certain type of people that are turned off. And the older you get, the more you're kind of at peace with, like, that's just who I am. That's who I'm going to be. And the people that like it, they can hang out at my lunch table anytime. And the people that don't, it's like, well, there's all those other movies for you. So
with that, although you kept pushing it back, the bait and switch right at the end, the big sort of switch up with Eric Balfour, Jared kind of becoming, well, not taken to it. That was always intended then, going in for a second film.
No. I mean, always intended. Like, you make the movie as you go in a way.
Yeah.
The ending, I think the first draft ending of Skyline was, she woke up on the ship and it was, we just had very, very minimal stuff. And all of a sudden, we had the brain thing, and all of a sudden it was like something said her name and it went to the credits. It was like a total coda, like, oh, she's still alive. Right. Because the real ending was the aliens won and our heroes are abducted. And now we saw that as the ending.
Right.
And then it was just like people kept asking questions, and good questions, and we kept kind of developing it. And then, yes, once we got to finishing the movie and to the place where we were all really happy with where that all goes, then yeah, we were totally excited to do a sequel, and as was Relativity at the time. And so they kind of told us, like, go work on a sequel. So Josh and I, we holed up for a little bit and came up with this big crazy treatment where they went back to New York. It was kind of still similar to what Beyond Skyline's overall structure was. I came up with the Mark and Trent characters, and we kind of we actually were even going to shoot a little bit of Mark and Trent in the first Skyline, because we were in post and we had this sequel treatment. And we were like, what if it cut like just to these guys going in the subway as the siren light went down? Yeah. And the sequel was those guys. And then I don't know if you remember in Skyline, there's a scene where they look out the window and there's these guys on a truck firing machine guns at a tanker as it goes down the street. That was going to be them. So we had this like intersecting narrative, and there was just no budget for the truck going down the street and Beyond Skyline, so that got jettisoned out. But so yeah, there was like, once we were in post and we were happy with the story and that, we were like all really excited for the sequel. And once the movie came out and underperformed, I guess for the budget, it wasn't like an underperforming. It was just that they had spent so much on the P&A, they were really expecting a big hit, and it was a hit internationally, not domestically. I think it did okay. It did okay on DVD and that stuff. And so, some of that excitement waned, and it went away. But every once in a while, someone would ask about it over the next 2 years. But a lot of the times they were kind of asking, obviously the treatment we wrote, I'd say, was like a $40 million budget.
Yeah.
And they would be asking us to basically do a knockoff of Skyline in another city. They were like, can you do Skyline Shanghai, where it's just
no,
you're in another high rise and it's a same riff on those beats. And I just was like, absolutely not. That was the least interesting thing, least interesting path imaginable. So it was kind of a struggle to get that bigger, more ambitious version done for about the same budget as the first one, a little bit more. But ultimately, I think if we had just done it that way, that would have been it. We would never have a third film. The fact that we were so far reaching and able to set up this much bigger world, and even that bookend is what the third film became, having Lindsay Morgan as this, alien hybrid war leader kind of heading off into battle with the aliens is like, okay, now we have a direction to go in.
Yeah, plus it's like any good kind of genre movie sort of thing, and I'm going to reference the Purge because obviously the Frank Grillo connection, but the first Purge was in the house. It was a home invasion style movie, and second Purge we go out into the world. Third Purge, it's like this huge political thing. Like it's like I love that franchise, but when you're doing these kind of movies and these genre movies, like even if you are playing with a smaller budget, you kind of need to get bigger and get better. And that first movie definitely ends with like a holy shit, you're not going to believe this, by the way, and sets up like the second one and the end of the second movie. 100%.
And I think that's what you're saying about genre matching and ambition is that the first movie has a very horror kind of thriller structure, and then all of a sudden in the last 8 minutes it becomes a comic book sort of origin film. And so you're either going to be into that or you're not. And then in the second movie, it was like, we kind of get there about 30 minutes in. It's like, well, wait a minute. It starts becoming much more actiony if you've got like, Frank Grillo as John McClane in an alien ship, kind of, in a wife beater with a bloody leg and like with a baby strapped to him and an alien claw. It's like, it just starts getting like, okay, this is starting to feel pretty graphic novel comic book. And then, we just kind of keep going from there. Like the Resistance happens to be inhabited by the badasses from the raid. And, we're going to have a get to know you fight in the mud. And, we just kept escalating. So yeah, I think it's like what I was saying, where it's like, I feel like we just keep building up from where the last one is to get, I guess closer to what the real things that I love. It was like we used a feint at genre legitimacy, and now I'm just going full into what I'm really really wanted to do the whole time, which is like, it's hard to. It would be I think it would be next to impossible if you took this movie Skylines and you gave it a different title and it had no connection to the other movies. To get, no one would believe that I could get this script made for that budget, but because it's the tradition of those other movies, that immediately goes, okay, these guys, they know how to do this in a certain way. So that makes sense. But then also it's just like the leeway of like proving that it works and that there's a market for it. It gives you this kind of this gift to make another film because of the track record. And I think it's up to you as the filmmaker to fully exploit that gift by giving people something completely different and crazy and not just rehashing.
Absolutely. I remember as well when you're saying about people talking about it and everything. Like, I remember when the second one was dropping. I think I watched it on Netflix and it was dropping. And I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, "Oh my God, they've made another Skyline movie. This is great. Get to see what happened next," kind of thing. And then I kind of thought, but like the first one, from what I remember, people didn't really take too well to it. So it's kind of, so how has it kind of come about? And the thing is, over the years, it has found a little bit of a cult following, and people are really taking to Skyline now. And especially when the second one dropped, people loved it.
Well, I think it's interesting. Because I think it depends on how old you are when you see it. Because
yes.
I think if you're a younger guy who saw or a younger guy or girl, because actually a lot of women like the first one. The second one I made an unabashed boys movie, but the first one had male and female co-leads, and I think the younger you are when you see it, the more taken you are to it. Like I have, my son is 11 years old. And he's horrified of alien movies. He won't watch any of them. So he won't even watch the PG-13 Skyline. But his cousin, my nephew, like they loved the first one. And I think it's also because if you see it at the right age, you're not going to have seen a movie with an ending like that before.
No, definitely.
Because not many have it. So when you see it at the right age, you're going to be like, I didn't know movies could do that at the ending. That's kind of cool. That's weird. But if you're older and you're seeing it, you're like, that's bullshit. You can't do that in a movie. You can't do that ending. So I do think it obviously it depends on your personality, but I noticed people that would not like Beyond Skyline because it was so different from Skyline tended to be younger because they had seen the first one when they were younger and they considered it good. But the people that were older when they saw Skyline and they saw Beyond Skyline, they were like, oh, finally you did a good one. So it was just interesting. You know, it's like you can never win, but it was definitely, I found that to be a consistent thing in the demographics of likelihood of which one that they preferred. And I do think the third one, just from the nature of now having a female lead, it does have some flavors of the first movie that weren't in Beyond Skyline. It does have some visuals that are like a little bit more motifs from the first movie kind of come back in fun ways in the third one. So yeah, it does feel like, I mean, look, marketing wise, we're calling it a trilogy, but this is not George Lucas, like, you know, writing the hero's journey, you know, in some Bible. Each one has been, you know, like I described the first movie, kind of a creation of circumstances and kind of being inspired with the opportunities and the situations you have and try to make the best of it. And I can't really, I mean, that's what we try to joke about, like historically, like what movie would be what other franchise would be even applicable. It's funny that you mentioned The Purge because I hadn't even seen the first Purge when I'd written Beyond Skyline. I hadn't, and so I was writing it for Frank, and Purge Anarchy came out, and I was really like nervous because I saw the trailer. He's like leading a group of people through a city, which was our first act. I was like, oh man, and then it was a big hit. So I was like, we're not gonna be able to get him. So I watched all of them, and I was like, oh, there's an interesting thing here between, you know, a kind of between those two movies. And but I don't really know what movie franchise would have like, you know, this one first movie that's very contained, a second one that's like a balls to the walls action movie, and then the third one that takes the wraparound character from the second one, makes her the lead, and then goes on this huge space mission to an alien planet. So I'm like, it is kind of, I'm just kind of pinching myself because I feel like it's a really lucky thing to have happened.
I'd like to quickly step on some Beyond Skyline tours because this was your first directing job as well. Fully throwing yourself in there on a sequel to a movie that not everybody loved. What I did want to know was the whole in the first act and everything. It runs side by side, and there's even like some angles of some shots that kind of you kind of BVS it, and you kind of have like the you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. The beginning
I'm
of
really misexplaining this. Yeah. So you kind of
there was a lot more of that. There was a lot more of that in the early drafts, like when we were. I was really very, very sticking close to the continuity of the first film because the first film, it very deliberately says it takes over 3 days.
Yeah.
And it was not. It was really not giving our film good pace to have them break for the 3 days in the first act. So it was ultimately became this like, are you going to make a good movie or are you going to make like a continuity, like, you know, impeccable movie? Because and so in my mind, when they say like it's going to take us a day to walk from one end of the city to the next, and we do the time cut, it was a day in the tunnels, and so it lines up in a fudged continuity. But yeah, we had, like I said, the end of that first act originally was Mark and his son and everyone arguing that like we couldn't just stay in the tunnels forever. They got up on this truck and they were making a run for it, and that was the truck that was out the window in Skylines that the tanker ends up knocking over and exploding, and that was supposed to kill Garcia, who now gets killed underneath the bridge. So when they come up out of the tunnels and they're running to the marina, that was all supposed to be the truck chase that was going to kind of coincide with part one. And still fairly similar with them all getting sucked up onto the ship.
My question on that was this sort of like a creative choice that you were making as a way of, yeah, sort of soft rebooting the franchise, but also paying homage and love to the original film?
Yeah, I guess it was. It wasn't. It just felt like a cool idea for a sequel. I mean,
Yeah.
what Batman versus Superman? What year was that?
Well, that was a couple of years back.
No, I think it because we wrote this treatment in 2010, so it was definitely something we wanted to do from then. That whole idea, and I think it was because a little bit of a frustration even before the movie came out from other people's reactions is that we wanted to be down there in the street, but we only had, the budget of the movie was that we were going to film this whole thing in this penthouse. So we were like, there's just such cool opportunities and different perspectives that we can get down in the street. So even before it came out or any reactions, that was our instinct, was to like, we could go down in the street and we could kind of go through the greatest hits of Skyline in the first act.
I love that.
From this different point of view, have everything link up, and then we have the characters link up. Because also I think it was like just a general storytelling instinct that it was like going to be a difficult story to continue with this alien and the girlfriend on the ship, and that we would need additional characters to kind of push the narrative forward. Originally, Elaine, her character lived a lot longer in even a later draft, the first towards production. She was going to live a lot longer, and she was going to give birth in the bunker. So the birth wasn't going to happen on the ship.
All right.
And it became something that was just like to give more of the focus onto Frank and have him kind of own the scenes more. It ended up something that I think we thought would be a little bit more fun and a little bit cooler, because it ended up being, it's just great seeing him with this baby kind of as this protector. It's with the claw on the ship. And so even though it accelerated everything and it kind of pushed the whole Rose storyline into the past the credits of believability, it was still kind of worth it to us to have it like, okay, we've caught up with the other film. We're giving you the legacy of this, but we have to be on to our new mission, our new objective.
She quickly does a little bit of exposition, and then it's like, right, let's move on.
So that, I'm just giving away how many different iterations and stuff that I worked on Beyond Skyline. But originally I was like, we had her not do that exposition, and after they gave birth, Mark and Jared did like a mind meld, like straight up Star Trek. And we did like all these weird POVs. So I shot all of this weird POV memory stuff. And we ended up using that footage in the clips where Trent is kind of deprogramming himself.
Right.
And those were actually, it's kind of weird because they're like, wait, it's Trent's memories, but it's looking at Trent as a kid, because those were all Mark POV stuff that we were doing during the mind meld. But we made use of it there, and it just didn't quite work, and we needed to get through it quicker. And so we're like, oh yeah, it'll totally make sense if we actually take footage from we kind of reshot footage from Skyline with some visual effects of Skyline, and we used the actor Tony Black, who we had originally shot as Jared when we did like our teaser to get financing for the first Skyline. So it all kind of came full circle. But yeah, her exposition was a definite crutch that helped us get through that spot, and it ended up working out really well.
See as well, though, I love it when people, when directors and creators and writers do that kind of thing, where it's just kind of like, right, this is the crack, let's crack on. Like, it just, yes. I just prefer that sometimes. I don't need any massively outrageous sort of mind meld, as you say. Like, sometimes just her turning around and saying, look, this is what happened, this is why it's happened, let's go. Yeah. That to me is all I need. I'm a very...
I agree. It was definitely, it was one of those things that it was just apparent it wasn't working. Yeah. And to make it work would have required an incredible amount of more visual effects and wizardry that we needed in more important parts of the story. So it was like, yeah, we have someone right here who can explain everything.
She's been there and done it. So you've gotten really lucky, to be fair, with your casting for these movies, or maybe it's just going out and getting the right guys you know who to speak to. But
I think it's luck. You're right.
I mean, Frank Grillo, to be perfectly honest, when I went to see the first Skyline, I was already sold because it had Angel from Dexter, it had Turk from Scrubs, I had Milo from 24, one of the girls from Sweet Valley High. I'm like, I am all over this film. And then the second one comes along, Frank Grillo, Iko Uwais, Yayan. I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, how did you get this cast for the second film? And we'll get on to the third one because, Jesus, you stepped it up again there. But
great. But, yeah, the second one I just was a huge fan of Frank's, and I just thought he was perfect for the role, and wrote it for him, and you know, he thankfully, like, the casting director that we had, he read it and he was like, I just see Frank Grillo here, and I was like, accomplished. And so everyone was cool to send him the offer first on these indie films, and you kind of have to write a letter to the actor, especially if you're nobody like me, and appeal to like why you love them for this part, and you know, kind of give them some sort of pitch on what the process would be like together, and how you see them in this film. And so I wrote a very, you know, impassioned letter to him, and it seemed to get a response. And we actually Skyped just like this, and he was like, it's definitely in my wheelhouse. You know, he could see it, he could feel it. He's like, it's just, you know, all of his notes were all within the first act of kind of grounding his character. And then once it got in the action, he's like, well, you guys know what you're doing with all this crazy alien shit. You know, I'll trust you there. And then it just so happened, you know, I'd set the movie in Laos. And so we went to scout the movie in Indonesia. And the first dinner I had in Singapore, right across the bay from the studio in Indonesia, was with what became our executive producer, Mike Willon. And he was like, you know, would you like the Raid movies? You know, I think those guys might be game to be in the movie. And I was like, are you kidding me? And it just so happened, timing wise, of course I loved the Raid movies. I'd seen them in the theater and I was a huge fan. But timing wise, they were doing the earlier version of The Night Comes for Us, which was going to be a different iteration of it. And the financing or whatever, it all kind of stalled for that version. So they had their work schedule was open, and right where we were going to be filming. So, you know, my producer and I, like, we just were like, you know, jumped at the opportunity. We flew to Jakarta to meet with their manager, and, you know, just kind of did whatever it took to get them. And then that completely changed everything. I mean, they had so much, and they still do. They have so much, you know, such a cool factor and so much credibility that it was like, I think that's what really opened up a lot of pathways for us, even within the festival world, from where we are now. You know, it just completely changed the perception of the entire movie to give it like, well, I guess they're doing something pretty badass, or, you know, those guys wouldn't be in it. And I had such an incredible time working with them that, like, all I wanted to do after that was make more martial arts movies. And that's why I've been working on a project that I wanted to do for Iko as the lead, you know, ever since that movie, as a bigger kind of, you know, new outside of the franchise story. And then even for Skylines, Iko wasn't available to come back when we were filming. He's doing G.I. Joe. But so I was like, well, look, we ripped Yayan apart in Beyond Skyline, but who says we can't bring him back? Let's address it. Let's have some fun with it. The movie had kind of like, I felt like it was missing a little of that madness from Beyond Skyline. It was missing a little bit of that flavor. Mm-hmm. And so luckily he was game to do whatever we wanted to do, and wrote him back into the movie. It's not a huge part, but it is a lot of fun. And you kind of get to see him do stuff you haven't seen him do before.
I mean, let's be honest, Gareth Evans did it as well, because he killed him in the Raid 1 and brought him back for the Raid 2.
Yeah, I guess he probably had the good sense to make him a different character. I just said, fuck it. We're bringing him back.
You don't do that. Don't do that in a Skyline movie. It'll be okay.
You're gonna see how he was able to survive having his appendages ripped off. That is addressed.
When those guys came on board, did that kind of change that whole section of movie? Because obviously, big martial arts guys. So
it was kind of a war movie. It was like, it was more like shooting guns at aliens backed into a corner. That sort of action, more like Predator, I guess. And then once they were involved, it was like, okay, so the guns are going to get kicked out of people's hands now, and we're gonna fight. And we just started talking, and they started working on choreo. I mean, even that fight between him and Frank that wasn't in the script. I was like, okay, I need to have you guys have a get to know you fight. It's eco. And then even the day before we shot his intro scene, where they see the ship crashing, there was no fight in that hallway. And I was like, I'm thinking we should add another fight. And they came up with it. We shot that in a day. So, I mean, they're just so good at what they do. I just kept wanting to add more and more. And funny enough, we shot that stuff first. So that was what we did all first in the movie. And so we're so confident in our second half. And it was all about just getting to that point because we felt like we had such an amazing production value. And so
second half of this movie is nuts. It is absolutely nuts. And that's why I instantly I love the second film. I think I really enjoyed the first one as well. I've said enough to you, but I think the second one, I love the switch. I love the running in the streets of Manhattan kind of thing and going up into the ship and then coming down, and then it turns into like this big punchy kicky martial arts movie with Eco from the Raid, which, I mean, literally when I saw that Frank Grillo was they played the lead, and then I'm going through the cast list and I'm like, holy shit, Eco. Huge fan of the Raid. And I'm like, I tell you what, if I sit and watch this movie and those two don't throw fists,
Okay, so again, this is like we're on the same wavelength, because I got notes back from people that you should just cut the fight. It doesn't go anywhere.
No, you can't do that.
They wanted people like actual like agents and money people like that supposedly know what they're talking about in movies were telling me to cut the Frank and Eco fight, and I was just like, you got to be fucking kidding me. I'm like, what am I selling if you have these two guys in a movie and they don't fight each other? What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's just like some of those basic laws of an action movie. I don't know. People don't seem to care about that shit anymore, but I do. And there was no way in hell that I was going to ever cut that fight. It was what we shot the first 2 days of production. So it was like literally the first thing I've ever shot as a director in a movie. And they're like, yeah, you should just cut it. And I get why they make the note, because the script obviously worked without it. You could just have them be like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
It worked, but it was too fun, and kind of like threw you into like you said, a genre switch and a chaos. Yeah. And sort of that moment where you're kind of going like, wait a minute, are they really doing this right now? They're really going to, change gears this hard into a different movie. And it's like, I don't know. To me, you had to obey that law. If you're going to have these two badasses in a movie, they have to throw down.
Even if it's your movie, you do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, well, and when you're a first timer, it's not quite the same. Luckily, there was definitely a lot more freedom on the third movie. I mean, I'd still say I had a lot of freedom in general, but it was I was the youngest guy with older producers and a lot of opinions and notes and all that stuff swirling around. And you just kind of have to have, I think coming from writing is a good background for notes, because your writing gets shit on all the time coming up, and you kind of have to get thick skin. And you have to kind of figure out how to address notes that aren't necessarily the note. You're not going to take that idea. There's something else within it that you can get around. Yeah. It was like, that was definitely one of the bigger notes that I fought really hard for. And I think it's the same thing as any notes in any writing, is that you're just like, I'm going to have to outwork them rather than just do exactly what they say. And if you keep working and you keep changing and trying to make the rest of the movie better, then sometimes they just go away. And thankfully, those went away.
I have to say, I'm not saying it would have diminished the movie or anything like that, but
it absolutely would have diminished the movie. It
no,
absolutely
no,
would have
I'm
diminished
saying
the
like,
movie.
if you
It's for people, but people make those notes because they don't like the movie. They don't like, so like you have to think of where you're getting the notes from. Is it from
yeah,
someone who is actually going to buy a ticket for this, or is it from someone
yeah.
who's just like, I'm a professional and I'm going to give you my opinion. So you know, I'm much more. I feel like I'm more in tune with the type of person that would actually watch this movie and hit the button than, you know, the people that kind of look down their nose at it. So, but yeah, we didn't really have any of those bigger creative battles or issues on the third movie. The bigger thing to me was earlier in development, there was pressure. I guess I want to talk about this after the movie came out, but there was pressure to do like a different ending. And so I kind of was undoing it on the set as we were going because I didn't like the ending. And I shot two endings. And the ending that I, you know, always kind of felt was the right one is where the movie ended up. So maybe we'll talk about it after you've seen it, because it's just one of the things I'm most proud of, because it, you know, normally it just being able to execute what is on the script to your best ability is incredibly difficult. But to like have the script and then also have this alternate thing in your head that, like, you know, isn't approved and everyone else isn't on board with, but you're going to sneak it in these little places. You're going to make time in the schedule to do an alternate version of it. And you're going to work with the actors and kind of re-script this thing on the fly. And it ends up coming up like, of course, that's the ending. It's perfect. Yeah. It was just like, it felt like just, you know, like a graduation moment for me. It was something I never would have been capable of before. And those are just the little things that, like, you know, you can take away from each movie to the end. I felt like in this one, I was shooting reshoots as I went because of the experience of doing pickup days, yeah, and dealing with, you know, reshoots and stuff on the second one. As I went, I was like, okay, I don't know if we necessarily got that information great in that scene. I'm going to pick up that same information, you know, in this scene where they're just in a truck and they're just going from point A to point B. We just need travel. So let's have them maybe say that in this scene, and then I'll have options in the edit.
Yeah, man.
And that ended up just being like, you know, a different level for me, and made the end result like just so much better. And we didn't have to do any reshoots at all.
The very definition of running and gunning.
Yeah. But so, while still being very meticulously planned, but like, oh, yeah, yeah, you have these alternate ideas of things where you're like, yeah, you know which scenes, you can feel them on the day, like which ones are working and which ones aren't. And you're like, okay, we're probably not going to have that scene in the movie. So where else can we sneak that information in? And so little things like that, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I also really liked about the second movie is in the first movie, you didn't have a great budget. I mean, it was a good budget, but it's very CGI heavy.
It's actually funny because they're very similar budgets. It's just they spent way more money on the VFX and the sound. It was just like everything in post, because we shot so cheaply the production, and then we got picked up by Universal, and so money started flowing in. We kind of overspent on the post-production. So it was a very unbalanced movie. And so my experience from that was like, okay, if you take $10 million, like how do we, $10 to $15 million, how do we split that up in a more balanced way that's going to get us more bang for our buck in the optimal amount of production value? And so it was like, we need to spend less on the VFX. Even though we had more, we're not going to spend as much on them.
This is what I was going to say, because the second movie, you've got a lot of practical in there.
Yes.
Do you prefer doing practical, or, as you say, was that just splitting up the budget wisely?
It was definitely, it's both. I mean, I love, there's limits to practical and there's limits to CG, and, you know, there's each one has their place. But I definitely want to have as much in camera as possible, and then I can add CG. But the experience of the second movie was, I knew we had to make it the pilots practical. There was no way we were going to be able to do it the budget if they were fully CG characters. So that was very early on. I wanted to do it that way. The other thing that happened on that movie is that we were supposed to build a much more practical alien ship, and some of the difficulties of actually building safe sets in Indonesia with the amount of rock and roll truss that you would need to do them hanging upside down on a 40-foot tall set, like that whole, which we called it the silo in the second act on the spaceship when Frank's trying to rescue his son. Mm-hmm. That was supposed to all be an in-camera set, and that just was not practical to build in Indonesia. So we ended up shooting it on green screen in LA. That blew the VFX budget and the post-production schedule and everything, because to me it was like, okay, we have these little CG sets that we're going to need to expand things, but I'm going to build this practical set, and that's the set where structurally we spend actually the most amount of time on the ship. I was cutting back and forth to it because I knew that was going to be free in my head, because like, okay, we're building this set. Once the set's built and I've got a shot of Johnny and Boyana hanging upside down, that's not a VFX shot. I'm going to have a background, I'm going to have atmosphere, it's fine. So the fact that those all became green screen, like, is why the movie that we started shooting at the end of 2014 and then for 6 months on and off in 2015 ended up coming out in 2017, because the amount of shots were just so much more. And even though green screen, it's like some of them were simple shots, they're just time consuming. It's just like the logistics of getting them all done on a low budget means you kind of can't rush people, and you have to wait until they finish it in between other jobs where they're getting full rate. So yeah, that experience pushed me into this third one where I was like, I can make Beyond Skyline, I can make the same size and scope, but with 500 less VFX shots. If we had just stuck to the original plan, we're going to even go more aggressive in this. So I was always putting as much of the set into the shot, but like I kind of built more diorama sets in the third one, where I would build like 3 walls, but the 4th wall is going to be the green screen. So you always can cut to one angle that has a different view that can be a little bit more epic and a little bit more, scope. But the rest of it, we can get our meat and potatoes of scenes done without every single goddamn shot being a visual effects shot that you have to, work on for a year. So that was kind of the evolution from one, which had almost all of it was location based, except that last day in the green screen. So that was all just shooting on locations with the actors. I mean, there's not even a real stunt double in the first Skyline. Even, Scotty and Eric both got on those harnesses on the rock truss on the top of the roof. So it was all location based, 1 day of green screen. The second one was a ton of locations, a lot of green screen stages. It was everything. This movie, the third one, was a lot more stage work with built sets and very selective green screen. And then we did a very big backlot set that is sort of our B story. And we did a couple of different cool locations around Vilnius, Lithuania, which is where we shot. As for London, because everybody knows Vilnius, Lithuania looks just like London. But yeah, so it's just like each time I'm just trying to kind of, I guess, perfect the formula to maximize the budget so that I can make the biggest, coolest movie I can, each time out.
So talking about the biggest, coolest movie you can each time out, what can you tell us about Skylines without any spoilers? Where are you taking us? What genres are you smashing? What is this movie about?
Where am I taking you? What genres am I smashing? I feel like it's definitely, it's a little bit of a James Cameron smash of sort of a post-apocalyptic future war world with aliens. I mean, if you look at Lindsay Morgan, our star, who I first, discovered from the 100, which I just kind of like, it was a little bit similar to the feeling of when I first saw Frank. I was like, oh, this is just my type of character. Like, this is my type of actor. That's a badass. She seems like a throwback to 80s, 90s Definitely. Female action heroes. Like, and it, you know, so when she would like come out on set in her wardrobe and like all oiled up, ready to go, I was just like, this is like looking at like Linda Hamilton and Sigourney Weaver. It just kind of like, it felt like something new, because she's definitely, you know, her own person and she brings her own experience to it. But it had this like, this kind of a certain touchstone to those movies growing up. So that's kind of what the whole thing is built around. It was like a little bit like how the second one is built around Frank and his persona and his skill set, and kind of really trying to put myself into that actor and do all the things I want to see that actor do. That was where I came at it with Lindsay. It was like just kind of really trying to get into her headspace and really do what I think she's great at. And what she's really, really great at is trying really fucking hard. she like really, and it's something I really found I enjoy. I enjoy watching people fucking give a shit and really push as hard as possible. And so that we kind of built that into her character's powers, which isn't too big of a spoiler, because in the second movie we see her piloting an alien ship and sending a blaster out. And so I liked that, the idea of doing this sort of kind of an alien hybrid superhero story, but that each time she used the powers, it hurts and it drains her of life, it ages her. It's got like a real price to it.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was like such a cool sort of way to build in that, like, you know, sometimes powers can just seem kind of too magical, too easy. And like what are they actually doing? But we understand when someone's pushing as hard as they can and it's draining them and they're losing, because that's what humans are like. If we run for a marathon, we're dead afterwards. You know, we're totally beat. So I wanted to kind of try to make it a superhero story like that, set within this, you know, crazy Skylines universe. It really does feel like a sequel to a movie that didn't exist. It does feel like it almost jumped over and you have to kind of catch up in the first act. But I find that exciting. It's like, look, a lot of shit's happened. It's 15 years later. Catch up and get on for the ride. And as far as creatures, and we're talking about practical and CG, you know, that was part of the doing all the practical aliens in the second one and still having them in this one. I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to introduce a new type of alien, of course, each movie. And so there's kind of another hybrid approach to a new type of creature that you're going to get to see that is, I think, in keeping with the rest of the movie, is that there's a little bit of nostalgia, familiarity to some of the things that it's doing, but it looks like nothing you've quite seen before.
Always got to progress, man. You've always got to progress. Lindsay's stepping up in a big bad way. And you're right as well. I just want to touch on that. You're right as well about the quality she has, because it's one of those, you know, when you first watch Alien, and it's not really until the last half an hour of that movie that you realize Ripley's the main character, because the whole movie's based around the rest of them, kind of thing. And you do get a little bit of that sense in Beyond Skylines with the Lindsay Morgan character. Like, it's sort of like, this is this guy's Ripley. Like, this is going to be your main character in the next movie, if she survives, of course. You do kind of get that. But
well, it was actually when she like just delivered the one-liners to the alien, kind of walking through the ship.
Yeah, I
was like, this is exactly the tone that I've been kind of wanting to get to. The whole movie, and that was the last thing we shot for Beyond Skyline. So I was like, man, this is fun.
Love it.
I think we could build something around this entire dynamic. And so Trent and her are kind of, to me, the heart of the movie.
And again, you've got lucky with cast again here. I mean, you might say you got lucky, you might say word of mouth now, because the last movie did do well, but the likes of Rona Mitra, I'm a huge fan of Rona Mitra.
How could you not be?
She's awesome.
She's pretty much exactly what you would want Rona Mitra to be. I'll tell you that.
I would hope so.
She's very intelligent, very cheeky, and a badass. And she won't. You kind of have to be on your A game, and she'll like hit you back with like some sarcasm that you're just like, man. every time you're talking to her, you need to focus. It's not just a relaxing conversation. You need to focus because she's going to beat you up like in a very funny way. So she was a great sport, and she kind of knew exactly what movie she was in.
Mhm.
And once we kind of really got into some of her more, war battle scenes, once she kind of really got excited into the idea of doing one-liners, she would be like, it's like, it's always a feeling out process. But then once she really she's like, wait, you got anything for me? And I'd be like, I do have a one-liner. I was a little sheepish about writing into the script, but I'll whisper it into your ear. And she just, without a beat, she's like, oh, that's a Roger Moore line. I can do that in my sleep. And then bang, she does it. And I'm like, holding my mouth, laughing behind the monitor, just like overjoyed. So yeah, I love Ronan Mitra.
So what are those actresses that, like she's done well. She's definitely done well. She's been in a lot of good stuff, but you just wish that her star would just explode, and she needs to be making like the massive movies. And I dare I say it, I'm not a huge fan of the Marvel movies anymore, but I'd love to see her just command one, because I'm a big fan. And of course, I saw Alexander Sadega's in there, so anybody who's a Star Trek fan, you're gonna love that. And
yes.
the wonderful.
And he taught the rest of the crew how to do the fake ship jostles. Everyone was like, just watch what Alexander does. He's experienced.
Oh, he's got years of it.
Yeah, and he, again, is definitely like his character has a lot of dialogue. I think that's why you would want to hire such a great actor.
Oh God, yeah.
But then would be very open to playing and having a lot of fun. There's some stuff. I'd wait till after seeing the movie to talk about some of the fun stuff that we did with him. But I mean, I do have to credit my producer Matthew Chows for the casting. I was getting really nervous. We didn't have Alexander, Rona, or James Cosmo, or Leon, Jonathan Howard, our male lead. We didn't have them very close to shooting, and he was just like, relax, because it's one of those things that like you start to get closer to production and different availabilities. It all kind of like gets clear, and boom, we just started landing amazing actor after amazing actor. The last being Jonathan Howard, who, speaking of Marvel movies, I think most people would have only seen him in not only seen him, but most people would know him from Thor: Dark World. He played the intern that like makes out with Kat Dennings. And so he's like this is like, I don't know, eight years ago. I mean, that was like 2011. Nice. He's a very thin, skinny guy. And he's obviously, but he's very tall, and he's gotten bigger. But even when I first saw him, he got in really good shape for the movie, and it was a very different thing for him. But he was one that I felt like is a discovery. I mean, he kind of has like this younger Christian Bale sort of energy, but can also be very light and comedic and kind of carry a scene. And he's the one that I felt like I could trust to really kind of like spice it up with some ad libs. And so Leon kind of has a very interesting, like I said, he is the male lead of the movie, and he has a very interesting arc. But I think in other hands, he might lose people in the first act. He can do bad things, but still kind of make you like him because he's such a good actor. But yeah, he's definitely he's a northern Brit. I let him speak in his northern accent. It's thick, it's dirty. But I think a lot of people are going to like him in this movie because you haven't really seen him, show almost every, Monsters and Soldier, Godzilla, Gods and Monsters. But it's just, no one's ever quite utilized him, I think, as well as this movie does. And so I'm rooting for him, all the way to kind of be unaffordable for me in the future.
Obviously, I know a little bit of the history after the first movie came out and all that, and you sound like you had a reasonably good experience on the second movie, but you sound really, really excited for this one to come out, and I won't lie, it's really got me excited. It sounds like a bigger, better, badder movie. So yeah,
I think it just goes back to that ambition story, like ambition thing. Like it's like and I'm just in a place now where I haven't shown it to anyone, and no one's seen the trailer, so there's just this feeling where I'm like, I don't know, what the reaction's going to be, but we're in a little place where I feel like there just hasn't been anything like it. Like Beyond Skyline came out 2017. Justice League was out the month before with Thor Ragnarok, and Last Jedi came out the same day as we were on a VOD. I mean, there was no shortage of sci-fi alien spectacle. Now we are in 2020, and there's just there hasn't been anything. I mean, the last big sci-fi movie is Rise of Skywalker. I mean, Invisible Man, sci-fi element, but it's still kind of a horror film, horror thriller. So I was like, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I try not to get too wrapped up into expectations, because that can be, a real bummer if things don't work out that way. But I kind of feel confident about this movie. It makes me nervous. I don't even want to say it out loud, but I feel like it's a really entertaining time. It's a really fun time. And I think for people like you, who are obviously seem open-minded and into like an ambitious adventure, I don't know, there's not 100%, there's not a ton of comps that I would say of like who's done a movie with this kind of much scope and wildness at this budget. The closest thing I could think of would be the first Pitch Black. That's kind of the closest thing that I can kind of imagine with it, but I still don't think that was as big. So
I was kind of thinking about that the other night when I was watching the second movie. I was kind of sitting there in this place of like, I really wish we got that third Pitch Black movie, like.
Well, me too. That's why I made it.
Exactly. But that's what I mean, though. Like, in a sense of like, if that's what you were waiting for, like Skyline seems to be the perfect franchise to sort of jump in and just take that and take that under your wing and fall in love with it. And
I think I tweeted that. I think I tweeted like I'm making Riddick Underverse.
Oh, nice.
But no one knows it. But yeah, no, I love Chronicles of Riddick, and I think that's exactly the comp for Beyond Skyline, where the genre change thing.
Yes.
Because I remember I was with friends who were just like, "What the hell is this?" And me, I was like, "I can't believe they're doing Space Conan. This is fucking awesome."
Exactly.
I just was super into it. And so, one of my friends was like, I didn't realize that you were going to make your own Chronicles of Riddick after you saw Beyond Skyline. And I was like, that's funny that you mentioned that. I can see it. So, yeah, I'm a huge David Twohy and Vin Diesel fan. So there's definitely some Riddick Pitch Black homage. And I like the third film Riddick too. I like all of them. But yeah, the flavor of Chronicles is definitely my favorite. It's the craziest. And so that batshit like go for broke mashup of like 4 different stories is like always to me like it's like it's high on its own supply. The movie is high on itself.
It's kind of just like it's kind of we teased this whole world and we teased this whole mythology behind the Furians and everything. Now we're just gonna go batshit and show you everything. Yeah. That's kind of, and that's one of the things that I really appreciated about Beyond Skyline. You didn't just kind of, because there was a sense, like I remember the first time watching it, and you have all that the first act with Frank Grillo running around the city and all that, and you're kind of sitting there thinking, well, it might just be Skyline, but down on the street level. Which, don't get me wrong, I would have still been entertained, but then you kind of just go, nope, not that movie, this movie now. And then another half an hour later, you go, tell you what, it's not even that movie anymore. It's this movie now. And that's what I really appreciated. Like you say, ambition, always driving, always getting bigger and better. And I feel like that's why these are the kind of movies that people should be paying attention to and they should be going to see instead of the form. I don't want to say formulaic, but yeah.
I like those Marvel movies too. So I'm not saying it's not an if or. But I appreciate you saying that, and I did for part 3. I was like I was trying to marry that ambition to a more cohesive story. Mm-hmm. So I still think it throws a lot of crazy twists at you, but it all kind of feels part of more of the same journey, rather than very deliberately. Beyond Skyline was three acts were like three movies, like you said.
Yeah.
Like you could totally see just the LA subway story. That could just totally be a lower budget movie.
Yeah.
And then you could also just do the Die Hard on the ship. That could be a pretty awesome movie. Yeah, I'd love to see
that's
that.
how you reference that. Like,
Yeah, and then and then the third one being our Apocalypse Now, with aliens. That would be a totally different one. So
yeah.
you could have made all three, and it was just like, if I have the opportunity to do this, I'm going to try to do everything that I've ever wanted to do in one movie. And that was even at the end when it was like, okay, we have to do this reshoot. We're going to do this reshoot, this wraparound.
Yeah.
Well, let's do like a Star Wars scene. And so adding a big Star Wars scene to go out on it was just like the perfect cherry on top of the genre mash sundae. And that ended up being the place where we could build into part 3.
Awesome, man. I don't want you to give me any spoilers or anything, but much like Frank and Eco, and I was super excited to see them throw hands. Rona and Lindsay, maybe?
Interesting. I didn't see that. They're kind of they're definitely more allies. There are more allies in this. Missed opportunity. You should have. You should have watched the first. They need to fight in the first act. How did I?
You had them saying the opposite.
I broke my own law. I don't know. The resident martial artist on this film is Daniel Bernhard, who he was an agent in the Matrix sequels.
Yeah.
He actually replaced Van Damme in the Bloodsport sequels.
Yeah, Bloodsports.
And he recently is in everything from John Wick to Atomic Blonde to Birds of Prey. He's really tight with the 8711 crew. And he's just such a great on-screen fighter and a great actor with this cool look that he kind of fits seamlessly into anything you want to do. So he was he's the Colonel Owens character, who's kind of the leader of the team, and so he's a really great on-screen fighter, and he has a couple of really cool fights in this movie. And I don't want to give away our other big fighter because they have a great fight, and it kind of is a surprise. But yeah, you can't once you introduce martial arts, you still have to keep martial arts. You can't.
Oh yeah,
I would never abandon you. Don't worry.
Let's be honest. We love alien guns and we love all that kind of thing, but hands and fists. It's always going to win. It's always going to win.
It's always going to win.
Are you, depending on how well this goes and how well people pick it up and everything like that, are you potentially planning a fourth?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, I would definitely do a fourth in a heartbeat. I just feel like it's a different world, and I would love to keep doing another movie and then come back and do a Skyline movie. Like, I don't see the reason to stop because of the amount of freedom and flexibility that I've managed to build in, or we've managed to build into this franchise, that there's so much elasticity that I feel like I've gotten to make 3 completely different movies anyway.
Yeah.
So you get to kind of try new things and learn new things and still kind of deliver on what people want to see. So yeah, I mean, and I love the cast. And so I would definitely, in a heartbeat, want to work with everybody that in the team that we've kind of built over the years. But without giving too much away. But yeah, there would definitely be, where the opportunity arises, yes, I'd jump on it in a second. Yeah.
I remember after seeing the second one and talking to one of my friends who I actually went to see the first one with in the cinema, who much more appreciated the second one. We thought the second one was a lot better. And then we kind of got talking about the thought of like a Skyline series. We thought it could kind of work as a series if you wanted to go down that road. But then he sort of said, yeah, but they did that Fallen Skies, which is a little bit similar. It's not the same, but it's a little bit similar. So yeah. But would you ever go down that route if it was a possibility? Yeah,
it's just, it's funny because there's been talk of it, and it's been something that has been brought up. And I think it would just have to be the right concept, which
Yeah.
there's one that is interesting because, I mean, we do have a gap in time between Beyond and Skylines that is kind of an interesting space. So there's different things that we've been developing and we've been thinking about. It's just, I think my apprehension is that like even I just have been focused so much on movies as like the one that I feel like I'm just getting good at it. And now it's like, okay, go do something completely different. I'd love to direct, TV episodes. I'd love to like step into that world a little bit more, because I just love directing. I love being on set, and it would be a lot of fun to just not be the writer, not be in charge of everything, and just come in and kind of work with a cast that's already established and do that type of work. But to kind of launch the series and do all that, it's just like it has to be the right circumstance.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the movies, and I enjoyed the kind of seasonal aspect of it. Like every 3 years, it's something kind of cool about it, and not kind of it as all consuming as a TV show, I guess, could be. But I mean, I jump at it if the right circumstances were to arise and we had the right idea. But like you, I think it would have to be well into the sort of post-invasion world after Beyond Skyline, because I think to go from where the Frank story ended at the end of Beyond Skyline to where we pick up even within that, where we came to Rose on the ship, like what happened between those years, that's interesting. But I don't think I'd want to do anything that would be back in the immediate timeline of the invasion. And I don't think I'd want to do anything that's in the same timeline as the movies now. So it's something we're thinking about.
I kind of love the idea of having the 15 years of sort of making your own mind up what went on. That's always some of my favorite aspects of movies like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is that like I wouldn't want it to be like a wheel spinning show. I'd want it to have like a real propulsion and point.
Yeah,
I really do like The Mandalorian. I think that was I love that the episodes were kind of all the right length. And if it needed to be a little longer, they had the story, they made it that long. If it was shorter, it was shorter. It didn't feel like even some of the best shows that are action shows, it's different than watching, like a dramatic show, or even like a very funny character driven show. My favorite shows this past year were like Succession. It's like that was amazing. It never felt like they were like really spinning their wheels. But I feel like action shows can kind of really get stuck into a wheel spinning rut that I'd want to avoid. So yeah, it would just come down to, really figuring out the right story.
I'm going to let you go in a minute because I've taken up far too much of your time. But first of all, I would like you, if you don't mind, obviously you have to ask that, but if you don't mind, I would like you to give the pitch or what you would say to get somebody to go see Skylines, or when it hits on the digital for Frightfest, because I think they're putting that out so people can watch that.
Yeah, you can get the tickets right now.
Yeah, so what would be your strapline?
This is actually, I think, the first interview, or maybe second, that I've done for this. So it's the first time I'm actually trying to sell someone in my head. So you're definitely putting me on the spot, but I'll give it a shot. Well, like Beyond Skyline, you didn't need to see the first one to understand everything that was going on in the movie. And this one opens up with a bit of a recap. So you don't need to, if you haven't seen Beyond Skyline, you can still give this a shot. I would recommend at least watching Beyond Skyline, but I kind of pride myself on that you don't need to, and that each one should work as its own movie. But why should you give it a shot? Do you love science fiction, adventure? Do you love horror? Do you love martial arts? Do you love exploring new worlds? Do you love seeing something that was done with a ton of passion and for not a lot of money, but that maximizes it at every step? if you like all that stuff, I cannot possibly imagine you not loving this movie. I think we did a really good job of kind of touching on all the things that have worked in the previous ones and making kind of a more character-driven science fiction adventure. You know, like I feel like Lindsay's character is finally the most important person in the world. So it just makes 100% sense that everything is built around her. And the whole story is kind of dependent on her actions and the choices that she makes along the way. And ultimately, I feel like it kind of does everything that I wanted to do when I set out to do it. And it goes really, really entertaining for, not even for the budget, just for a movie. I find it to be the most entertaining of the three, consistently, nonstop.
Awesome. And honestly, I can't wait to see this movie. I know when I first reached out to you on the Twitter and everything, it was I said in my message that the first Skyline does actually have a soft spot, like in my heart for me. Like, it's one of those movies that I genuinely came out of the cinema and thoroughly enjoyed, and probably one of the first movies that got a little bit of a bashing by the critics and by the audience, and I couldn't understand why. You know, normally you can understand why somebody doesn't get the movie or somebody doesn't like the movie. Skyline was one of the first ones that I just didn't understand why people weren't hitting it. I mean, you've got Turk from Scrubs in there. Come on.
I love Donald Faison. He was great. Yeah.
But honestly, like I say, that was one of those ones. And then Beyond Skyline totally crept up on me. Hitting the I think it was Netflix I watched it on, and I was just like, oh my god, they've made another one. Like, awesome. I can't wait, you know. And that's
going to be that should be on our poster.
Oh my god, they've made another one. or it's a movie that you know, that could work too.
Well, like full disclosure, if I wasn't the Skyline guy, I would totally make jokes about the fact that there's 3 Skylines. So like, I totally get that is
I don't think it is
an incredibly unlikely scenario. And so you know, people will they'll just be like, I can't believe there's another Skyline movie. But I'm just here I'm not generally cocky or overconfident about anything, but I just feel like the movie is better than your dumb joke. That's all I'm going to say. This movie is better than your dumb joke. Another thing I'd really enjoy on this movie is that people could just say it's good without couching their criticism of saying, or saying like, it's a good, dumb, fun, turn off your brain movie. Like, just say you like the movie. Like, you don't have to like try to like defend yourself from getting criticized because you enjoyed something. Never apologize for enjoying something, people. Just watch the movie, enjoy it, and tell other people to watch it. That's all you need to do.
Well, I can't wait, man. I can't wait. Honestly, it's like I say, I love the first 2, like unapologetically, Cheers. I could say, but I did, and I can't wait to see the third one. Anything you're currently working on, or anything you can't tell us about, or anything that you've got on the boil outside of Skylines?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there's that other bigger martial arts project that's something I'm really passionate about. Co-wrote, I wrote it, and then Derek Kolstad from the John Wick films came on and did a pass on the script, and it was awesome working with him. And I think it's still the best script of anything I've been involved with. And then there's this other project that is, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say about it, but it's sort of a horror survival story, World War II setting in the Arctic. And so it's kind of a different vibe for me. It's a little bit more, I guess you would say, mature, but there's still a creature aspect to it. You'd still kind of understand why I'd be the person making it, if that makes sense. But it's definitely a little bit more of a there's a little bit more what's the right word? It's a little bit more of a character study and suspense and thriller, and it's kind of it was something that I had read before making Skylines, but then after going through shooting an Alien Planet on a stage and realizing like, oh, doing something in the Arctic is not quite so different, and kind of studying how they made The Thing, it's a combination of locations, and it's actually less locations than you think, and it's a lot more on stage. Another show I was watching, I watched over the pandemic, which is really great as a reference, was The Terror, season 1 of The Terror, which is on Hulu. Really, really awesome show. And so, yeah, that's something that, without giving the title or anything, because it's like, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it's on the boil, as you said. Excellent. And I think it would be a really exciting thing to do next. And then hopefully, we'd love to come back for Skyline 4. Excellent,
man. Excellent. I can't wait to see the film. I really want people to check it out when it does the Frightfest business in the UK. Anybody listening, this will be going out probably like maybe a week before or a couple of days before, so that we can try and promote it a little bit. And please do check it out, everyone. And if you love it, go on Twitter and tell everyone. And if you don't, just shut up. We'll be okay.
Yeah, just shut up.
You don't have to love everything, but you also don't have to say you didn't love everything.
Right. And you can just say you love it. You don't have to say it's good for what it is.
Exactly. You know what it is? I hate when people do that. Like I've read it.
You can tell I hate it. I was like being funny, and then I started getting dark. So much of that with Beyond Skyline, where I could tell the person really liked it, but they had to put a little self-defense there, so that if people are like, "Are you kidding me?" And it was like, man, it'd be nice to just have people not damn you with faint praise and really be honest. Did you like the movie? Yeah. Well, then I guess it was good.
I've had that a lot recently, because I tend to deal with the independent guys. Like I watch a lot of independent movies. I review a lot of independent movies. It's kind of where my heart lives. I don't hold them up to the same standard as a Marvel movie or whatnot. Whereas I've met a lot of people who do that, and it's like,
I know, it's crazy.
So like,
but it goes into my thought process though, because I know, the things that you're not going to get away with and that you are, and the things that are going to bump for some people and not. But it is crazy to me, like just the lack, just the things people don't understand with budgets is that it's ultimately infrastructure. Do you understand that, like, the amount of people working on the big budget thing means that so many people take care of all of these other little things that the filmmaker doesn't have to stress out about. Whereas, when you're in this smaller budget range, you kind of have to have your finger in every single pie, and you have to, just kind of stress yourself out to the max. I mean, I ended up being a VFX supervisor on this, and overseeing like 600 shots. It was like, and it was just because that, it was a pandemic and someone had to do it. And so, it just, even within that, like the lack of infrastructure, and just that it's really just a handful of people making this thing is quite extraordinary. And I think that's what was almost, the number is not what matters. It's actually the amount of people. It's the size of the team. And so what's great about having that small team is having that flexibility and having everybody be on the same page. But it does, it is fucking hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had
not to say the big budget isn't hard, but I think it's just something that would help people understand how to contextualize it like you can.
Yeah, but I love speaking to the guys who make movies I love, so that's why I instantly, when I saw there was a Skylines coming, I was like, yeah, fuck, I'm getting this guy on. I need to speak about these movies.
Wow, thank you for having me.
It's been awesome, man. It
was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, man. It's like I say, genuinely, when I saw the thing turn up on Twitter, I was like, Skylines. There's another Skyline movie. And then I saw somebody saying we should just call it SKYLIN3S or something like that, which I thought would have been a great name. That's not a bad name. I would have rocked that. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but
yeah.
But honestly speaking, man, when I'm going to be getting the Frightfest, it's on sale now. You said I'm going to be getting that, so I'm going to watch this when it drops for the Frightfest. So you better.
All right, well, you got to let me know what you think.
You better
I hope I haven't overhyped you now. You're like, oh shit.
Oh, you kind of did that in the first 2 minutes, and then obviously when I went on IMDb the other day and I saw Runa Mitra's name, I was like, man, I'm so fucking in. Like
I'm just gonna, I think I've backed myself into the corner on this interview because I hadn't said any of these things publicly, but I think it's really good, and it feels weird I think from the reaction to the first film and getting beaten down so much, and then the second film, I was so scared. I was fucking horrified that it was going to get the same reaction. And even the first review I saw at Sitges, after we had this great screening, and you check Twitter, you doom scrolling, check it. The first one gave it like a 4-star review and said like it ruined Frank Grillo's career. And it was right when I got back to my hotel room and I just was like, fuck, like I was like, and then I scrolled again, and then there started to be like 6 stars, and then 7, and then it was 8, and it was like, okay. But the first one was some asshole. And I was like, it's happening again. I can't believe, how did I blow this? And then it was like, okay. And then it was a really interesting reaction where it was, I think Den of Geek's review was really the big turning point, where they just were like very effusive and very complimentary on The Ambition, funny enough. Yeah. And that sort of like was like this big relief to me that like, okay, at least somebody got what I was trying to do and what we worked so hard for. So after that, I feel like, okay, I think I have those people I think are going to be happy with this. And now it's like, okay, can this one grow even bigger? Yeah. Is that possible? Let's see. I feel like 2020 might have conspired to help the Skyline franchise grow. We're selling water in a desert, you know. No one's been able to, you know, go to on anything quite like this. There's no Guardians 3 coming out, you know, there's nothing competing. So hey, you need that fix. We got it.
You never know. It might just. I love that. I absolutely love that. 2020 worked for someone anyway. But no, again, and you're showing it. The Frightfest audience is a phenomenal audience. I don't know if you've been. I don't know if you've been before.
Beyond Skyline screamed there, but I wasn't. I was. I think I was in. I was promoting in Indonesia at the same time, so I didn't get to go.
It's a fantastic audience. I think they'll really dig this. They will really get into this. So
I feel like the UK, to be honest, has been very supportive of both 1 and 2. I mean, definitely. Both from the press and from the fans in the UK. I think you guys have a more attuned sci-fi sensibility than anywhere in the world. I think it's because of Dr. Who. Yeah.
We basically created sci-fi.
True. It seems much more game fans here than most places. So yeah,
I think it's because we just don't take ourselves as serious.
It's true.
So what I'm going to do, man, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go and let you have a few more beers. And honestly, man, this has been absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love that poster in the background. I've kind of just been looking at that most of the time.
This is the first. This is the first draft. We'll see. It might end up being the final because it was so goddamn good.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
The artist's name is Julien Rico, and he's a French poster artist who's kind of famous for doing these trilogy posters. And so we asked him to do one for us, and yeah, I love it.
That looks badass. So I'm gonna let you go, man. I hope you get the movie finished in time.
Me too. Thank you.
I can't wait to see it.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.